Wow, some kind of nerd. Some kind of blurred nerd. A blur nerd. Yeah, I don't. Camera just decided to do that. The camera has been absolutely fine until I hit live. So let me just fix that. Look at that. Look at that. Isn't that fantastic? Why has it decided the focus 200 miles away? Who knows? There we go. We're back. We're back. We're on camera. We're live from New York City or whatever it is. Yeah, so welcome in everyone. So this is something that I just had the idea to do today, actually. This has not been something I've been planning or in the works. So live from the dungeon. This is actually a video of like a fireplace. This isn't meant to be a dungeon. This is meant to just be like a cozy fireplace. This isn't a castle or anything like that. It's just a cozy fireplace. I'm just chilling, all right? I just thought, I'll put a nice chill background on. But yeah, so this is just something I had the idea of earlier. And it's because after the vaunted and famous anime watch along that we had last week on the Discord, after that, I was just sat in Discord chatting with people, talking about, D&D, TTRPGs in general, and just things we like doing. And I remember I used to do this a lot. We planned the whole world of the Guild of Icons together on stream. And I haven't done that in probably 3 years at this point. So I thought, well, let's do something. And then the ideas sort of spiraled. And it was like, well, what if I do a thing where I just chill, we chat, talk about TTRPGs in general. Again, it doesn't have to be D&D or anything like that. And talk about the craft of, like, hacking things. Because, like, there's a lot of people who talk about, this new, here's how to make your own D&D. Here's how to make your own D&D. Here's how to choose the exact right game. We're going to talk about all the games that are coming out and releasing. Things like that. And some people just want to hack stuff, people like modding games, people like modding video games, people like hacking things. This isn't just about D&D, by the way. I know I mentioned that because it's the most common thing. This is about modding all sorts of games. Plenty of TTRPGs you can just do a quick little hack to. And, either make a game that you're already running work for a slightly different genre for a single session or something, or it could just be adding a new enemy, adding a new encounter type, something like that. Resist product brain. yeah. Let's position this that way. It's recycling. It's reduce, reuse, recycle, which we've got to be careful if we're using free word sentences, because we might get arrested in America at the moment. But yeah, so I thought, well, why not do that? I'm not sold on this being a podcast, because I just wanted to be a casual thing, really. I might get like guests on though sometime, because like hearing Aeon's thoughts about forgotten the word of it. It's got a German name. But you were talking about it a fair bit on the Discord, and it's a style of RPG where no, it's not a specific game. It's a style of game. Free Kriegspiel. That was it. Free Kriegspiel. Which is, if correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm like bringing on shattered memories of when we were talking about it. But it is sort of a case where it's a lot more, I suppose, open, for one thing. There aren't like a million rules or anything. The referee or whoever is just going, okay, how do we make this, how do we translate what you want to do into some chance-based system or some mechanic on the fly? That might be wrong, because I didn't do any prep for that specific question in my head. Or have Keith on to talk about Keith's favorite topic, Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition. But there could be I think a very interesting podcast to talk about the really cool things that edition genuinely does, and the way that has changed, I think, the hobby, despite the fact that it was sort of consigned to a bin by a lot of the people at the time. You know, like, it has changed. Like, Lancer is very heavily influenced. You can talk about other things. True, we'll bring you on for Lancer, aka Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition in space. Or Gamma World, aka But no, we could talk about all sorts of things. You know, we might get guests on, is what I'm saying. I'm gonna play it by ear and just see what works. This might be the only one we do. Who knows? So yeah, this is going live out on YouTube and Twitch simultaneously. It's even going out to YouTube Shorts, which is just fucking wild. Somehow that's working. Who knows? Yeah, you can talk about Powered by the Apocalypse, yeah. And you know, and that's sort of it, because all of that will involve some level. I think it's basically a fact of TTRPGs that eventually you're going to want to hack something. Just unless you're doing only one shots, the game is going to run long enough that you're going to want to do something that's slightly outside of the boundaries. Or if you're purely running a pre-written adventure, maybe. Like, if you only ever run Curse of Strahd, maybe one day you'll even know how to run it by the end of it. But eventually you're going to want to hack something a little bit. You're going to want to tweak something. A rule doesn't work for you, feels naff, or you need to just, today we're doing a beach episode, and it turns out the dungeon delving game is not all about that. You could change rule set. Good luck getting your players to learn it for one session. So, you want to do a hack. And yeah, we'll just go over all of that. But yeah, nice and relaxed, nice and chill. I might get some music going because I hate talking in silence. I hate it. I just can't. I know a lot of podcasts work in silence. If I upload this to somewhere, there won't be backing music, but I'm going to get some music going now because my brain will melt otherwise. All right. It won't be too loud though. It should be nice and quiet. So, like, lately I've been playing a lot of D&D. I've done a lot of hacks of those over time. I've probably done 150 sessions now. Like, I used to say I've done over 100 sessions. I'm pretty sure I've done 150 or so by now. It's certainly something I find personally easy to hack, but it's because I've got a huge amount of system mastery in 5e that I can hack it. I don't think it's the easiest game to hack. I do think it's easier than something like Pathfinder. Because the numbers... There's more of a leeway in the numbers in comparison to Pathfinder. Pathfinder has a sort of very strict arithmetic of where you've got to be going as you level up. Although I will talk about... I want to raise up a game that also has that and is also easy to homebrew. So it's not like... It's not set in stone that is necessarily bad, but because there is bounded accuracy in 5e, you can sort of go within a range and it's still going to be relatively okay. If, for example, you're doing monster design, you know that your AC somewhere between 14 and 20 is going to be fine. And that sort of thing. Again, a lot of that isn't communicated well. I'm hoping the new monster manual has better guidelines on making monsters because there's a lot wrong with that. Not least the CR calculation. But in general, it's relatively easy to brew up like a monster or something like that, and you can homebrew rules fairly easy as well. You can do them badly, but usually they'll serve for like a session or something like that. So I've been doing a lot of that, but I've also been doing Savage Worlds, and Savage Worlds is it powers Mobius Command, the sort of 6-session arc. And of course, just because that is a generic system, you've got to build a lot of it from scratch. I was lucky enough that we had access to Thrilling Tales. Thrilling Tales is a supplement for 1930s pulp adventure, Indiana Jones, The Mummy, that sort of thing. But that was for a previous edition of Savage Worlds, so we had to port it over and sort of update it. We didn't have to do too much, which was nice. but we did have to update a few things. I was lucky because the players kind of handled almost all of it for me. I think Kara did most of it. Al, I think, did a chunk of it as well. And I think Ben did as well when working it out, because on the running side of things, there's a lot to remember in Savage Worlds. There is a lot to remember in Savage Worlds. I think if they do a new edition of Savage Worlds and get rid of all of the modifiers and replace it with a target number system, I think that's going to be the ultimate game. And that is a hack I would make to Savage Worlds. Now that I've, played for a few sessions, that is a hack I would make. I would swap it to a target number system instead of... So the way Savage Worlds works is you roll a die. You usually roll 2 of them, depending on the skill. So if you're really, really good at strength-based things, you might have a d12 in it, right? Which is like the maximum. You roll that. You also roll a d6. You always roll a d6 because you're a hero. And you take the highest of the 2. And there's additional rules. It can explode if it gets to the maximum number, meaning you roll it again, you add it to previous one, etc., etc., etc. But that's the sort of core thing. You've got to beat a 4. The target number is always 4. And that's easy to hit for most people who are good at something. In Mobius Command, we've got people with D12s and things. So they're going to hit about 3/4 of the time. But that's to succeed on skill checks as well, not just hit people. And the problem there is that basically means you're succeeding all the time with very little complications happening in the plot, and it's not making for very good drama. The general consensus is that that's working as intended. You are meant to pass things with a target of 4, because 4 is considered an easy check. It's not considered one you're meant to be making often, but that's the default. And so the way Savage Worlds handles that is by having a ton of modifiers. An absolute ton of modifiers. I've made a list of common modifiers that I'm meant to be using because there's so many of them. I'm just going to reel them off and let me see if you can remember them. There's the range penalty, which is -2, -4, -6, or -8, depending on the range. The multi-action penalty, which is -2 or -4, depending on how many actions you decide to do. Recoil, which is -2 if your gun fires more than one shot. Called shot, and that's 1 shot per action. More than 1 shot per action. If you do a multi-action penalty, that's a different thing. You could be having multi-action penalty and recoil on them if your multiple actions are firing multiple shots. Called shots, that's if you want to aim at a head or a torso or a leg or something like that. Then there's cover, which will be a -2, -4, -6, or a -8. Distracted, if you're distracted, you've got a -2 on it. Fatigue, you've got a -1 per level of fatigue on your... If you're on an unstable platform, it's a -2. If the target is vulnerable, it's a +2. And then other ones, there's a minor, -2, moderate, -4, and extreme, -6. Who's remembering that? I'm not remembering that. I can tell you that. It's too much. Swapping it to a target number system where you go, okay, 4 is easy, 8 is medium, 12 is hard, or some other variants. Probably actually it's more like 4, 6, 8. Maybe it's 4, 8, 10. Something like that. I'm not sure. You'd have to run the numbers. But something like 4, easy, 8, medium, 10, hard. That lets you very quickly set something by just sort of vibing out what the current situation is, as opposed to going, okay, this is a -2, this is a -4, this is a -5. Give me that. I've had people succeed, like looking through all this, I've had people succeed on -12 rolls, which feels very cool. But setting that up and adding it all together, it's too much. So I'm hoping the next edition they'll fix that, but for now, that's a hack I will be doing. I'm not doing it in Mobius Command at the moment because they're already used to it, but in future games, because I will run future games in this system because I really like it. Like, I gotta stress, I like this system a lot. It works really, really well. But this one particular bit, which happens to be the core of it, is kind of janky and jagged. But yeah, it's good. It's a good system for anything where there's already not a system that's really good for it, you know? Because it's generic. You can Like, I turned around and went, okay, I need to make a game that is about time travelers hunting time traveling Nazis. How the hell am I going to do this? And I looked through it and was like, yeah, Savage Worlds will do it. And it does. It works really well. Yeah, so I've been running a lot of that. And I've also recently been doing a couple of different games, which was originally going to be a trial out for the Guild of Icons 2. Doing something different for that now. It's probably not happening because the Succession, like Mobius Command and all that, campaigns are just a bit more fun to prep at the moment for everyone, I think. I'm certainly enjoying prepping them. I've put many up on the list. But yeah, it's got some tricky bits. But I will say, when it comes to brewing up an enemy or something, relatively easy compared to, say, 5e. 5e, I think, takes longer than most games to create an enemy. You have to put a lot of maths into it. You can get calculators that do it for you, but it takes a while to set that up. And certainly, I would say Savage Worlds is a little bit faster. It still kind of relies on you knowing set numbers. There are certainly games that are faster. 13th Age, I found a really nice blend between complexity and also simplicity, I suppose. Worlds Without Number also, because it's very OSR, is very, very quick to write or run a monster in that. But 13th Age kind of hits both. So let me show you. Let me show you a 13th Age combat that I wrote. Over here. Look at that. Hey, I set things up. Isn't that cool? All right, so this is a combat in 13th Age. It should be visible. Do let me know if it's not. If you need a zoom in or something like that, should be visible. Okay, so this is actually the final fight of a session I ran for Al, Bree, and a couple of other people. So the concept is they are arriving at a ritual that is almost being completed to summon some terrifying monstrosity from across the Vale. And that monstrosity is the undead Reverend Bully Chesterton. And so they arrive and they can see on the map that there's a bunch of cultists and that sort of thing. So let's go through their stat blocks, because it's quite easy. So we've got dark cultists, cult leaders, human rabble. Now, admittedly, I didn't write the human rabble one. That is just straight from the book. But the others I did. And then you have some more. You have the final boss when Bully Chesterton arrives as well. So these are so easy to write. So a rabble is a mob of enemies, essentially. They function a bit like minions, if you understand 4th edition, or the various times people have brought 4th edition into 5th edition, for example, of 4th edition D&D. They act a bit like minions, but not quite. So I think they said this was, I can't remember which game it was based off of. There was something called mooks in there. Essentially, when you deal damage to a mob, you delete a certain number of enemies based on how much damage to you. So say you've got a mob of these human rabbles. They've got 9 health each, and let's say you got 10 of them. Someone comes in and deals 90 points of damage in one attack. They've killed 10 people in that attack. And that's not a hypothetical. That is what happened in this fight when Bree got a double damage critical sneak attack against the mob. So you then have this, I suppose it's a challenge for the DM and for the player to narrate how this happened. How did the sneak attack, the rogue, teleport in and kill 10 people who might be positioned all around the battlefield? But anyway, we don't need to modify that much. Here's the Dark Cultist, all right? So here's how attacks work for monsters. This is only monsters in 13th Age. First of all, we'll make ourselves an enemy name. Dark Cultist. Simple enough. Give it a level. The level gives you all of your stats, okay? Except initiative. I'll tell you about that in a sec. You give it a roll. Spoiler, in this case, is one who is going to debuff you, kind of like a witch sort of thing. And then a humanoid tag, just in case it matters. Doesn't usually matter. Initiative, you just pick a number based on how you're feeling. It's usually about 6. You go a little lower if you think they're going to be a bit slower. Go a little higher if you think they're going to be a little faster. Somewhere between 4 and 8. Doesn't hugely matter. We'll get back to the attacks in a sec. HP is set on a line. Level 2, 36. Armor class, physical defense, and mental defense are all set to, I believe they're all set to a certain value. I think it's 18 for AC, and then I think it is 14 for physical defense and mental defense, and then you can add +2 and -2 to one or the other to sort of customize it a little bit. These are priests, so they're not really that physical. They're more using their mind. So I gave them a higher mental defense, lowered the physical defense. Then when you're making attacks, the way 13th Age structures these attacks, I think, makes them a lot quicker to run than D&D or D&D-like games. You don't really know what the effect is going to be until you use it. So this one is quite a simple one. It has a ranged weapon and a melee weapon. So you're not making much of a choice. Are they next to you? Use the melee weapon. Are they not next to you? Use the ranged weapon. This means you can put loads of them on the ground and not really worry because, you know, the calculus is done for you. So you use the Cruel Sickle. If it happens to be an even number on the dice, you're going to do an additional 1d6 damage. That makes it a little bit scary, but that's it. Otherwise, flat damage. The monsters always do flat damage unless it's a bonus. So most of the time you just go 5 points of damage. Done. Dark Exaltation, ranged attack. 7 negative energy damage because, you know, you might get like resistances and that sort of thing. And if that one's an even number and it hits, impose a condition. Done. No saving throws, no nothing like that. That's it. That's your monster. That's all you got to look at. We've got our cult leader, who's basically an upgraded version. So you can see that we have the Cruel Sickle becomes the Crueler Sickle, and we have the Dark Exaltation becoming the Darker Exaltation. And, you know, otherwise, it's a 3rd level. It's a Wrecker, which is the sort of, it's a high damage. You know, it's going to wreck your day, basically. It's going to do a lot of damage. This, again, still does flat damage, though. And it just has an effect on an even hit. So this makes it really easy to write these, because you just go, okay, I've got the attack, it does some damage, and then we'll put something special in on you know, natural even hit. You have none of that. The target must succeed on a Constitution saving throw, DC 23, or take half damage, and etc, etc. It's done in a line. Darker Exaltation, exactly the same. This time it does something on an even or an odd, so when you hit, you're going to do something. As long as you hit, you're doing one of these conditions, and then you just go, well, it's an even number. It's hampered. And that's it. And, you know, it adds an extra little effect that it can do once per battle. It can revive 1 Dark Cultist. Simple. That's how easy it is to make these. And if we go to the boss, Bully Chesterton, it's got a few more abilities, but this is a full boss monster, who is, you know, a solo fight, basically. And you can still read it immediately, because the way it's structured when you're running it is you get the information you need then, and then you roll the dice and you read a bit more information. It's drip fed to you, right? So yeah, the information is vulnerable to holy damage because it's undead. It has a necrotic longsword, so you already know that it's going to do 18 damage if it hits you. If it's a 19 or higher, then it's going to do ongoing energy damage, negative energy, and it's going to add vulnerability to all undead attacks. If it misses, once per round, if it misses, it can make a second attack. Neat enough? Increasing the chance that it's dealing damage, becoming a bit scarier like that. And then it has a Psychic Blast, which just attacks nearby enemies. The reason they're called nearby enemies, or enemies in a group, is because 13th Age doesn't use grids and distances. Position in 13th Age is a condition. You are either nearby, you're either adjacent, nearby, or far away. And you can always move from one to the other. You use your move action to change from nearby to far away to nearby to adjacent, etc. Which works relatively well for Theatre of the Mind. I found it still a little bit complex to run that. I think second edition is going to have a bit more advice for that. They do still recommend you use maps anyway. Just turn the grid off and have people move around. I do find that not having that very precise positioning doesn't actually take away any of the tactical game. I think in 4th edition, strict positioning is needed because you get a lot of abilities that are all about positioning and movement and combining that. In 13th Age, you don't get those abilities, so you don't really lose anything by the fact that it's like there versus 5 feet to the left. You just go, can I get to about there? And the GM looks at it and goes, yeah, that looks reasonable. You can get there. Done. No one's counting squares. It's so much faster. Yeah, and then you got, traps as well, which are structured exactly the same. All of these I wrote. And it took me about 20 minutes to write the whole encounter. In D&D, an encounter of this complexity would be an hour and a half, probably. So this is despite being about as complex as D&D, it is easier to prepare compared to 5th edition D&D, which is very, very helpful. But it still has quite a lot of that role-playing complexity as well. If I go to the magic items, for example, is it boons and allies? No. I made a list of magic items. Where did I put it? Oh, there's one in Captured, which was the intro. I gave them all a bit of magic items for each one. So we'll just look at one. But the idea is that this is a cape. Gives you +1 to your physical defense, sure. And it has a power that recharges occasionally that lets you teleport. That's really cool. You have to be hidden to do it, but it lets you to jump around if you're doing stealth missions. And then for the sort of roleplay thing, every magic item in 13th Age has a quirk that affects your personality. So every magic item is sentient in 13th Age, and they'll also affect your personality while you're using them. So if you have the Spy Master's cape, you start to find that you end your conversations by leaving abruptly when the other person looks away. They're all silly like this. This is one of the ones from the official books. They are all silly like this. The spellbreaking ring doesn't respect personal space. The shirt or dress of contingencies, you have killer fashion sense. And it just gives you that little roleplay hook that is going to change over time. Over time, you're going to get different magic items and get rid of old ones. Your personality is going to gradually grow and change over time. And it's just a real neat, like the Girdle of Second Chances. You're an extreme Epicurean, which unfortunately reminds me of the anime I had to watch recently. And it just gives you that little bit to build your character gradually as you go along. So yeah, 13th Age is pretty easy to brew for. Let me show you one that is even easier. Worlds Without Number is absurdly easy. Did I put it in here? Okay, yeah. So I ran a Worlds Without Number session called The Suicide Squad Kill the Guild of Icons. And the idea was that someone had hired a group of players, low-level players, to take out max-level NPCs based on the old Guild of Icons characters. So Bree had to kill Grounded Walk, for example. So we'll skip all that and we'll get to the end. Here is the final... here's all of the monsters in the final room. Sorry, it was a building. This is a full building worth of monsters. All right, you've got Grounded. Oops, sorry, ignore that. When I click into it, it goes, you want to edit this table, right? We've got Grounded. We've got Belden Pots, Harpies, Big Gecko, Pikeman, Swordsman, and Archer. Most of this, you just take from a table. Worlds Without Number has this one table, and it goes, if this is a level this character, grab it. Use all of those stats. HP, AC, attack, damage, shock, etc., etc. And then you just add like a special feature if you want. And it has tables of special features and a way of generating a budget for special features. And it goes, okay, so let's say you want to do something that's particularly good at dealing damage. Take from the damage dealing feature, spend most of your points in there, spend few of them in the utility features, or spend few of them in the control features, or spend few of them in, you know, in the monstrous feature, which is like if you're a big monster, maybe you've got armored hide or something like that. And it's just like, it's written a load of them for you, which gives you a ton of guidance on how to run them. But yeah, like, that's the entire stat block for it. I just have to scroll through that table, and that's everything I need. So easy. Absurdly easy to prep for. I think the easiest game to prep for I've ever played. Like, the most complexity I had was simply learning what the numbers meant. Yeah, fantastically easy. Definitely recommend that. Look at that snazzy moving I keep doing. Anyway, that's that's just the joys of 13th Age for that. And the joys of Worlds Without Number is that they are so easy to prep. And yeah, 5e is probably one of the harder games to prep for. I would imagine Pathfinder is even harder. I know it gives you a lot of values, but it's just that Pathfinder has this very tight margin, at least 2nd edition anyway, has a very tight margin within which you are functional at any point in the game. If you're at 10th level, you've got maybe plus or minus 2 or 3 on your number that you can hit. So you've got a range of maybe 4 to 6. And in 2 levels, you'll be past that. So it's a real tight margin. And that, I think, makes it more complicated because you've got to worry a little bit more. I suppose if they're providing you those numbers, you don't have to worry too much. But the way monster generation tends to be is you look at a set of preset values, you start with those, and then you tweak them a little bit, and then you add some special abilities. 13th Age specifically points out that the table that you get is perfectly balanced, and is perfectly balanced for a good fight. So what you then have to do is add some unfair things so it's no longer a fair fight, because fair fights are boring. But I don't know if I could do that in Pathfinder, because I feel like if I add a few things to make it an unfair fight, it is literally going to be unwinnable. So yeah, the sort of the calculus you've got to do there becomes, I think, more complicated. But it might not be. It might not be. It is something I have not had to run for. I've only been on the playing side of it. But yeah, it does feel like it's more complicated. But yeah, Worlds Without Number, stunningly simple. 13th Age, both complex and simple at the same time, which I like. Al says, I don't really believe in a fair fight. And you're right. Aeon says, I think it depends on like how intensely stuff chain reacts with other stuff. And I think that's also a fair point. And I think Pathfinder kind of does a lot. But yeah, no, that's a real question. Like, a lot of modern TTRPG design doesn't like to combine things. Much I've noticed, Lancer is a complete opposite. Lancer loves combining things. But yeah, a lot of them, like 5e, there's not many team-up attacks. Lancer, 100% team-up attacks. Often teaming up with yourself. Tales from Elsewhere says, late to the party, are we talking encounter design? We are talking to encounter design. So we're talking about like which games make encounter design easy at the moment, like both, well, hacking them in general, and also just like creating a new monster or something like that. You know, so combining things is great in video game design, but kind of a headache for human GMs. That's the thing, because occasionally you just get you get someone who's come across a perfectly legal combination of things that suddenly means the game no longer exists. There's no point in the game existing anymore because no one's going to play it, because player A is going to unleash Armageddon turn 1, and that's the game. Video game, that's fine, because you're the only one playing. You know, if you want to ruin your own fun, fine. It doesn't matter. Like, for many people, finding that combination is the fun. But when it's a group game, that is going to ruin everyone else's fun, which is why 5e and all that have like lowered the team up things. There are team up things in 4e a fair amount. 4e is relatively balanced. It's nowhere near as balanced as Pathfinder 2e. I think Pathfinder probably balances some of the fun out of itself because it's striving so hard for balance. 4e is less balanced, has more team up attacks and stuff like that, which can make it swingy for a combat encounter. I'm looking at the chat, just waiting for Keith to go, yep. as he fondly remembers the number of times we've come out of combat encounters with more health than we've gone in with. It is very fun to play, though. I do hold 4th edition D&D as probably being the best combat system in any game. But any game I've played, anyway. 4th edition is stunningly good fun, because it essentially it turns itself into a form of sort of fantasy chess, and that's great. It's really good. I'm on record for saying I think it struggles outside of combat. A lot of the things feel like combat is a different game to the rest of it, which is something other games struggle with as well. I mean, you could say the same for Lancer. Lancer they kind of knew that, so what they did was they took 2 games and stitched them together and went, the two never shall meet. You have something very freeform and fiction first, outside of the mechs, but once you get in a mech, you're using the combat system. Keith says, let's be fair, 5e has issues outside of combat too. Yes, and 4e has those and more, is what I mean. 4e feels like you're not allowed to really use the rules outside of combat. I mean, you are, the book says you can, but when you start reading the rules, you're like, I'm not sure I can use this. But definitely 5e is not perfect in this at all. I don't think there is a perfect game. I don't like the idea of there being a perfect game or one game that suits everything. I think 5e is good at a lot of things it does. I think there's a lot of things you can steal from 5e if you're making your own game, for sure. But it's sure not perfect. And the same with 4e, same with Pathfinder and all that. I personally don't like Pathfinder, but I can definitely say it does a few things very interestingly. I'm definitely not one of those people who's just going to come on here and go, I hate game X, unless that game is Fatal. I hate that. That should not exist. Yeah. But other than that, in general, I think there's a game for everyone. Aeon says, I think player knowledge and player expectation is a big part of the dynamic here as well. Like, the D&D style is balanced encounters. I think you're right there. I think certainly in 5th edition it wouldn't have to be, but I think there is a player expectation for it. Like, I think every player goes into a combat encounter thinking, I can win this. And as you're right, as you say, Call of Cthulhu, they don't. Worlds Without Number is similarly built, actually. You are not meant to go into every combat encounter thinking you can win it. Which is why it sort of falls back on that OSR thing of when you enter a combat encounter, you're actually rolling to determine how they are going to respond to you. Because it may not even... an encounter with someone who is armed, let's say it that way, you'd roll to determine how they receive you because they may not be hostile. They may have something else they want from you. They may have a quest to give you, essentially, or they may just be indifferent, or they may be a little wary, but they're not going to openly attack you unless you do something stupid. And it also has things like a morale system so that you don't have to kill everything to beat him, because if you do, as it says in the book, most players will not survive, or most player characters anyway. And I think for sure there is that sort of wide variety. Savage Worlds, for example, you're basically meant to survive everything. Deadlands might be the exception from my understanding, but it's meant to be pretty hard for you to actually die in Savage Worlds most of the time. It is a little scary though sometimes, the combat, because the combat is meant to be pretty quick. It's meant to be over in only 1 or 2 rounds, because it takes longer to do a round of combat because you've got to deal out cards each time. So it is more brutal. but usually you're meant to be able to survive. Usually. Lancer, you're not expected to survive anything. That's why your mech is not you. Well, I mean, your mech is also sort of... Well, I suppose it's repairable, so that is a difference. Yeah, you're not meant to come out unscathed from any fight. That's for sure. Which is sort of then ties into the resource game around it. From my limited... Like, I've only played 2 sessions. 3 sessions of Lancer. But it definitely... You are meant to survive, though. You are meant to continue playing as your character and not roll up a new one when it doesn't go your way. But yeah, there's a lot. I think you're absolutely right. I think player expectation is... There's a vast spectrum of player expectation around death and survivability. I think there are ways to do this in games that don't historically have this. And, you know, some of it is going to be table management. Some of it's going to be setting expectations early. Looking at you, Death House for Curse of Strahd. Yeah, I think in general that is going to be down to the system you choose. I wouldn't mind running or playing in a horror game one day. But I'm a coward at horror. But I wouldn't mind playing in one with a system built for it. The bot on Twitch is suggesting Keith run Dread, for example, which, if I recall, requires a Jenga tower to play. I'm pretty sure it requires I'm pretty sure that's the one I'm thinking of. I think if it is, then I've seen a playthrough of it, and it does seem like an interesting concept. Yeah. Which, and that's sort of representing the teetering chances of the heroes. Which, yeah, sounds quite interesting to me. I wouldn't mind giving that a go. Outside of that, is there any system in particular that is hard, like actually hard to hack? Like something common where you look at it and you go, I'm not sure I could, reasonably in a small amount of time make a change to this. I know some people will say 5e, and I don't think you're necessarily wrong about 5e being hard to hack, but certainly a lot of people seem to manage it, whether for better or for worse. Yeah, most things are designed to be at least somewhat hackable. I'm not sure if there's anything that jumps to me as being like you can't... Like one-shots maybe? Like if it's a single-page RPG. But even then, usually they're pretty broad in their rules. You could hack it if you needed to. I'm not sure who's going to. I'm not sure who's going to take I must find Bigfoot and bang him, the one-shot RPG, journaling RPG, and add new rules. But maybe. People hack one pages all the time. Well, I suppose something more popular like Honey Heist, maybe. Or to turn it into your own... Oh, yeah, I'm missing out turning it into your own one-page story, right? Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. Tales from Elsewhere says 5e is easy to hack simply because of the cultural familiarity. It's just that most people are so familiar with its structures that customization feels easier, in your opinion. I think there's also something to do with the fact that it has a single resolution mechanic, which does make things a little easier. And I know a lot of games have a single resolution mechanic, but that being the core of it from which everything else is built means you can kind of go, well, I'm just going to borrow this bit and work on a couple of things around that. Using existing stuff and then go on to that. And, the same applies to Pathfinder and things like that in the modern day. It's only really the OSRs that don't want to use a D20 that get a little bit more complicated, I think, on that side of things. But there's tons of games with single resolution mechanic. I think that seems to be the go-to these days. There's I'm like jumping at my head. Like, are there many games with different resolution mechanics depending on what you're trying to resolve? Lancer. That's it. Like, Lancer has a different resolution mechanic depending on whether you're in a mech or not. Even then, I feel like like, people are making their own mech parts and all that. I also think siloing parts of the game helps. Because if you want to add... I'm just thinking in... like, because I'm talking about Lancer, for example. If you want to add a new mech frame, there is certainly a larger space to think about. Because Lancer's progression system... it essentially is you buy licenses to parts that you can then put on a frame. So those licenses can be from anywhere. So it's not like something like D&D where you have a class-based progression where it might get more complicated if you allow multi-classing. Lancer is you are multi-classing by default, and you are multi-classing a lot. Ooh. Sorry, everyone. It looks like I lost connection for a second there. Are we back? Yeah. Not sure what happened. I mean, we did have the storms recently, and things have been a little unstable since then. I might need to contact Virgin again about it. That's the first time it's ever actually full-on dropped and restarted the stream for me, though. That's wild. Ooh, what is happening? Alright, hang on. I'm going to do some quick debugging. Just make sure there's nothing... because you know how Windows Update does. Looks like we're okay, network-wise. Alright, that might have just been it setting up the stream. It looks like we're good, actually. It looks like we're stable. Sorry about that. Anyway, I was talking about complexity space, right? Lancer explodes in complexity the more... classes you add. You add a class to D&D, it doesn't explode in complexity because once you're on a track, you kind of stay on there unless you're multi-classing. And multi-classing, even then, you have a limited amount of complexity. Whereas with Lancer, it's suddenly you've got all these parts that are going to be usable with every other frame ever made, or every other frame ever made's parts are now added, like available for your frame. So it becomes quite explosively difficult to track all that complexity and make sure you've not made something that's got a really broken combo. Whereas 5e through the class system and most class-based games will have a relatively linear progression through the classes. You'll have a bit of branching or whatever, but it's not an exploding complexity of options for the character, which means just an almost infinite potential for breaking the game. Because I think that's the sort of the big thing people worry about when they're hacking something is this hack going to break the game? Keith says, and every one of those parts are unique with no crossover. Exactly. It's deeply complex. Yeah. Ooh, I am dropping frames again. That is deeply annoying. Okay. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'll power through. Sorry, people watching this live. I will power through. I'm recording this at the moment. I'll edit out the bits where it cuts. And I'll put it online afterwards. But that's deeply annoying. I love having to contact Virgin Media about broadband because they don't fucking get back to you. Yeah, lots of stuttering. I'll double check nothing's downloading or anything like that. Because you never know. No. Okay, I'm going to see if I can reduce the bitrate because we're not using too many bit. I'm going to cut a stream off that's not critical. That might save us a little bit of bandwidth. Fingers crossed. Bear with me a moment. So it's trying to catch up with all the frames it's missed, so it's like trying to send them through all as quickly as possible, which is a very weird way to handle it. Okay, we might be stabilized now. Yeah, looks like that's stabilized. So cutting the extra stream has helped. We're still live on Shorts and we're still live on Twitch. The horizontal stream I've gutted. Hopefully everything will be... Ooh, no, it is not. No, it's dropping again. I'm watching it drop. This is really annoying. Alright, let me close a couple of browser windows that I've got open. And we'll see if we can fix it. If not, we'll end it early and we'll sort of fix this up next time. It might just be I've got to contact my ISP. It's annoying. I think the storms probably hit something then that happened earlier. Yeah. I'll give it a moment to stabilize. Oh, is it stable on Twitch? Is it? It's still complaining in OBS. It's like we hates it precious for some reason. But if it's stable in on Twitch, then that's probably fine. I'll close Windows anyway, just in case. Oh, well, if it's working, let's get back to it. So yeah, the thing that sort of makes a game hard to brew for is that complexity explosion. That is this thing going to interact with 900 other systems that I don't know about 100%. And it makes things hard for the developers of the game as well. I think Lancer is probably therefore a little harder to brew for. I mean, it doesn't mean it's impossible. You do see it. You don't see it as much, I think, because Lancer is relatively popular. It's not the most popular game of all time. It's no Pathfinder or anything like that. It's no D&D. But it's still relatively popular. It's got a good following. And you see, I've maybe seen like 5 or 6 hacks on there. I've seen more hacks for 13th Age. I've seen more hacks for Worlds Without Number. And I think it is that explosion in... well, both. It's two things, I think. An explosion in complexity and in the mechanics. And the other thing is, I think a lot of people probably feel like you need incredible art to publish Lancer. And... that's just because the book's got great art. And you feel like you need to compete. Brew for Lancer generally requires to only build a license, which is 7 bits. Yeah, but that's 7 bits that you've then got to check if each of those 7 bits are going to break the game, combined with the 400 other bits that they interact with. Because your frame might be holding the equipment from the SSC... I forget the name of them. You think one of the least hacked for games, sadly, was 4E? I mean, they didn't have to hack for it. There was like 500 issues of Dungeon Magazine. Dragon Magazine. Like, that thing has something like 70 classes. I think it probably got enough support. Regardless. Like, I can't imagine the hell that would be trying to make a character with another 100 feats on it. I think part of the problem for hacking 4E is almost everyone is using the character creation software. And I think creating Homebrew for character creation software in general, I know an exception to the rule, and I'm about to mention it, and it's a game you might have heard of before on this stream today. But in general, it is a nightmare to do that for, all of these software. I mean, let alone the fact that thing's written in Silverlight and runs on XML. It's generally hard to do that if that's the way everyone's building their characters. The exception, of course, Lancer, where everyone, all 3 people who are making homebrew classes for Lancer, homebrew mechs, they are actually putting out add-ons that you can import into the character creator so that you can use it in there. That's really cool. It appears to be a JSON-based system. And yeah, that's great. That is really, really good. But that definitely does make it harder. I feel like 5e is going to have that issue soon. I think it's going to have that issue in the next 4 years with D&D Beyond. You can add Homebrew to D&D Beyond. It is complex, but you can do it. It's not complex. It's slower than you'd like it to be. But you can do it, and people do it for their own homebrew games. But I think that is going to have a chilling effect on people brewing things if people start only making their characters in D&D Beyond. I don't think that's ever gonna... I mean, it's already a huge chunk of people. Like, when I run paid games on Start Playing, every single player I have had on there has made their character in Beyond. And I understand why. It does most of the choices for you. For the same reason, that's why I've always liked the more purple, more better character sheet, which lets you choose things. I really don't like D&D Beyond in general, on a personal note, because as a DM, I'm homebrew and stuff. I don't want to have to make the homebrew in D&D Beyond as well, just so you can add it to your character sheet. Just get a free text square. Like, D&D Beyond character sheets need to have a free text square added to them that people can just type stuff in. I don't know why they don't. I mean, I have a good idea. I have a good idea why they don't. And that good idea is Wizards of the Coast doesn't want you writing in things from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything unless you happen to own Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. D&D Beyond is just helpful enough, I think, to kill homebrewing in D&D, which is a shame. Maybe this will change if the 5e Tools character creator ever comes out that they're planning, but I doubt it. And that's hard enough to add Homebrew to as well. I mean, I've done it, but it's not the easiest thing. Software and copyright licenses would help. Yeah, like if Wizards of the Coast allowed other people to make character creators, that would be nice. I mean, they do technically, but you're stuck with the SRD, which means it's fundamentally not useful. But I feel like they could solve it if they wanted to. They don't want to, but they could. The solution would be to offer an API on D&D Beyond which says so-and-so owns this thing. You know, like when you log into a site using Google and it then lets you go and use your Google Drive for storage, right? D&D Beyond, you log in to some other website, some other character builder using D&D Beyond. It goes and gets your purchase and goes, hey, this content is unlocked. D&D Beyond, you're still buying it there. You're still buying Tasha's Cauldron of Everything on D&D Beyond, but now you can go and use Tasha's Cauldron of Everything content in wherever you happen to want to make a character. Which means that third-party character creators suddenly can work a little bit better, and D&D Beyond still gets the money. I don't know why they don't. I really don't know. I know they want to keep people within their own ecosystem, but that still keeps people in your ecosystem because you've still got to buy it on D&D Beyond. Some games you basically have to hack just to make them work. Surprisingly few rulebooks have systems for starting NPCs and antagonists, for example. Yeah, I agree with you on that. It is surprising. You just got to wing it most of the time. No, I agree with you that. Like Worlds Without Number provides, I think, 5 stat blocks, and then the table that you got to hack it. And I think that's pretty common in OSR, from my understanding. I've only read a couple of OSR books. It would be Worlds Without Number, and Dungeon Crawl Classics. So it sort of two different approaches to OSR a little bit, I think. But yeah, it just basically gives you nothing. And I don't mind that. I think it probably disincentivizes new people getting into that side of the hobby, which is probably what some OSR enthusiasts want, which is really sad, in my opinion. Keeps us make them pay twice. I don't even think it's that. I just think D&D Beyond is arrogant in assuming it's the best way to make a character. And it is an okay way to make a character for sure, but I think they are assuming that they will survive even if they're not the best way to make a character. Even if no one's allowed to make something better as competition. Well, not even competition, because you'd still be funneling purchases through. I think it's that, and also I don't think they know how. I don't think anyone at D&D Beyond has the technical know-how to do that. It is a complicated field. You're essentially doing OAuth again, from scratch. First principles OAuth again. But I do legit think that while D&D Beyond has some talented people, from what I've seen, their technical solutions are lacking quite often. But it's going to be some higher up in an office chair somewhere in Wizards of the Coast going, no, we want control of this. Or in Hasbro, further up, is going, no, we want full control of this. We don't want third parties doing it. But they've forgotten that third parties doing it is kind of what made their game popular. More like no auth, yeah. You know, OGL debacle alone was show of that. I mean, never before have I seen a company fuck up so hard that they had to roll back so far that they rolled back further than they started. If I was conspiratorially minded, you'd almost think that was the point. Someone internal was like, I want this Creative Commons. Actually, obviously not. They're just idiots. But yeah, it was just a fundamentally stupid choice. It was like they'd forgotten from the last time they tried to do this. But they probably have forgotten, because no, institutional memory is a myth. And business graduates just think they know everything. Oh well. Turns out it's now all Creative Commons. Great. That's fine by me. Because that actually now means that as a third-party writer myself, I don't have to worry about their product identity anymore. Don't consider this legal advice, because I might be an idiot, but I'm 90% sure I can use any I'm like 99% sure I can use any non-trademarked entity from D&D now. Whereas before, there were things that they didn't have trademarks on that were in their product identity list that you couldn't use with OGL. So, like, neat. Like, there's a bunch of things that Wizards have not copywritten, or kept not trademarked, or kept the trademarks active for. Yeah, and it's 90% of the product identity list. I think Forgotten Realms is still trademarked. I think Mind Flayer might be trademarked, and I think there's another one. And I went through a huge list of them and checked. I was like, that's not trademarked. That's not trademarked. That's not trademarked. And it was only because you were using the OGL that you were bound by it, but now you're not, because it's Creative Commons. Because the OGL was a coup for Wizards of the Coast as well. Because the OGL infringed, it condensed people's rights a little bit more than they actually had, but it gave them, in exchange for that, security to know that they could publish without, for example, the OGL being revoked. So they chose it. They chose that comfort because, safety is great. They chose that comfort and safety of not having to understand all of copyright law, and in exchange didn't realize they were actually giving up a few things to do that. Probably not things they'd have cared about, but they were giving up a few things that they already had legal rights to. So yeah. That I don't know why. I start thinking about the OGL, I'll just start talking about it all the time. Do not consider that as legal advice. I'm not a lawyer and I'm shit at things. So don't assume you can now just write a thing about mind flayers or whatever, or beholders or something like that. But you know, maybe consult a lawyer before you publish anyway, and see what you are allowed to publish or not. Talk about my least favorite D&D class and a hack for it. My least favorite D&D class is the Barbarian. It's the class I played first of all. The reason I don't like the Barbarian is because it is considered a tutorial class. And I hate that concept. I hate that concept in the whole game. I understand that you're going to want some segment of the rules that people can interact with when they don't know the rules yet and they're learning, or they don't want to learn all the rules and they just want to be able to interact with the game for a little bit, right? A whole class in 5e is not the way to do that, because 5e, each class is supposed to be a certain kind of fantasy. So it's locking off a chunk of fiction by making it more boring. And the Barbarian is boring, or was. I'll talk about a hack the Wizards did to it that I think fixes it, but it was boring because all you would do, you had at any level, run up to nearest person, hit them. If you have extra attack, hit them again. Maybe grapple them. Rarely that was going to be doing much good. And that was it. That was the class. Yeah, exactly, Aeon. That is a job for the subclasses. And there is a subclass in Fighter that is just for that. The champion subclass is meant to be your, you know, I want the game to go a little easier for me, so it gives you a couple of extra benefits without you having to think about situational powers or anything like that. You know? Great. You have a bit more fun because you now crit on a 19, and that was it. But the whole Barbarian is like that. Now, there are subclasses that make it more interesting, but the sort of basic one that you get thrown into, which previously was the Totem Barbarian, is now the Wild Heart, I think it's called. Well, that might be what it was called in Baldur's Gate. It has a new name, I know that. That one gave you some customization, but only on level up. And it never really gave you much. Like, you chose, for example, Eagle Totem, and what you got was you can dash as a bonus action. That's it. Dropping frames again. Oh dear. Yeah, I'm gonna have to contact Virgin at this rate. I mean, it could just be a rough day. I have had days that have gone fine since, but yeah, I'm gonna have to have a look at that. I'll go downstairs and see how many, like, terabytes of photos Becca's uploading or something. Nah, it's nothing like that. It is dropping way too low. Yeah, tonight there's a button you can do on the Virgin website which is like, I'm having internet problems, and it goes and tries to connect to your router and then does a diagnostic up and down, and then it detects the issue. And what it does, it's not useful. Do not take away from this that it's a good system, because what it goes is, sounds like there's a problem. We'll send someone, and that's it. Like, they don't tell you when. Just, we see there's an issue. Hold tight, and then does nothing for like 2.5 months, which is what happened last time. But anyway, yeah. Worst class, Barbarian. What is my hack for it? What is my hack for Barbarian? Okay. Because I know what Wizard's hack was, which I think does fix it. Or at least makes it nicer, makes it easier, makes it a little bit less nasty. So the issue is, when you are in combat, you're always doing one thing. You run up, you whack, you run up to the next one, you whack, right? You don't have to think about anything else. Turn to turn, and you are also pretty hard to take down, so you don't have to worry either, turn to turn. You have two pressures as a marshal. How's my health bar doing? How is my chance to hit and all that doing? Both of those are fine as the barbarian. So you're like, cool. Like the rogue has to worry about health bar way more, and also positioning to set up sneak attack occasionally. The fighter has to worry about chance to hit, broadly speaking, and a little bit of health bar, not as much, but chance to hit so that you can maximize the multiple hits they get. The monk even more so because they get so many hits. They want to get their advantage or something like that, and then later on they get conditions. A monk is not a good class either, but that has been fixed of late. Barbarian's fix for me. I think I would give them, first of all, more rages, and second of all, alternate rages. So your rage, it can give you this basic ability where you take half damage, or you can do maybe one other thing as part of the base class and then another thing from your subclass. So the other thing might be, or your rage allows you to move extra far, extra fast, extra far. No, I'm thinking about that, and that's just Eagle Totem again. Let your rage give you a persistent use of it, which is like it takes 10 minutes, or a one-off use of it. So you spend your rage, and it's like an explosion of rage that maybe it is frightening nearby people, or it's blasting them away from you. Like you get in the middle and you activate your explosion of rage, and people are thrown left, right, and center. Or a subclass maybe gets a custom explosion of rage. I think that's what I would do. Give you that additional thing, but give you more rages so that you can do it, because you only get a couple of rages. Barbarian is a difficult one because, like, what is a barbarian meant to be? There's no way to define it that isn't at least a little bit racism. That is very true. It's based off of Conan, right? We all know that. That's where it's coming from. That's what they're trying to do is Conan, which is, as we're saying, a little bit racism. If it's all about rage, it should be a berserker. Absolutely. I think it is trying to hit that strong person character. It's interesting because it's almost trying to embody an ability score instead of embodying a fantasy. It's that sort of big, like, hulking bear-like person who lets their emotions control them a little bit more. And that's kind of it. And, like, that's not really a fantasy, is it? Like, that's instead what that is ability scores. Like, you can do everything that you want to do for a barbarian by having high strength and low wisdom, right? Although, funnily enough, they do often have high wisdom. You didn't even realize it was meant to be Conan, the barbarian. Does he rage? No, I don't think so. That's the funnier part. Yeah, but it is... that's where that sort of idea come from. I mean, to be fair, I don't think rage has been in every barbarian. I think that's something... I might be wrong. I can't remember what the 4E barbarian does. I think Keith can give me an idea of what the 4E barbarian's all about. I think the 4E barbarian's all about charging, right? Like, run into the fight, do a charge, and then do a bunch of free things afterwards. Is that what it is? I know it's listed as a striker, not a defender, so it's there about doing lots of damage and not tanking it. Oxyspring says, you only get so many rages in your life, don't waste them. Not a bad shout. we'll make rage even worse. You get 2 a lifetime. While we're discussing this, Wizards of the Coast did, I think, broadly in the 2024 version, fixed the class being more fun. Third edition definitely rages. Fair enough. Let me have a look. Let me have a look at 4E. There is a Rage Blood Barbarian, a Thane-born Barbarian, a Thunderborn Barbarian, and a Whirling Barbarian. These are sort of builds that you can start off with, so you don't actually have to go for it. Let's see what their actual features are. Okay. So you can have Rage Blood Vigor, Thane-born Triumph, Thunderborn Wrath, or Whirling Slayer, and Rage Strike. Okay, so your powers have the Rage keyword, yeah. Burns its rage powers as though they're like 5e paladin smites. Okay, that explains it. Yeah, so I'm looking at, for example, Swift Charge, which is from their Rage Blood Vigor. If your attack reduces an enemy to 0 hit points, you can charge another enemy. And a charge is a movement plus an additional attack. So it's for your full movement and another attack. So you're bounding through the battlefield like you're a pinball on a pinball table, almost. Which is very different from a 5e one, I think. And I can sort of see that working. If what you take a barbarian to be is a berserker, that fits. Again, it's complicated because I think the class in D&D that best actually represents Conan the Barbarian is the champion fighter. It's not a barbarian at all. It's a complicated one. Yeah, it's come to mean basically a sort of berserker of some kind who's fueled by this power that almost takes them. Goes into this stance that allows them to be a more capable fighter. One brew that I do really like, actually. This was made for me, so no one else has seen this. No one else has ever seen this. Let me go find it. This was made for me by Iris as a birthday present. A long time ago. So let me find it. Okay, theoretically this will work. Sorry if this doesn't. Here we go. So this is the path of the tactician. Let me just move the window over a little bit. And zoom in a little bit so we can read this. So, zoom out a bit. There we go. So this was written for me by Iris, and the idea for this particular barbarian is that when they enter a rage, they enter a state of lucidity, where they are able to analyze the battlefield. It's an intelligence-based barbarian. And it sort of has vibes of Sherlock Holmes in the Guy Ritchie, I almost said Guy Fieri, in the Guy Ritchie movies, the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes movies, where everything sort of slows down and he goes, okay, right hook, discombobulate, left hook, discombobulate, etc., right? That's what the barbarian is doing here. You gain this lucidity. And you also gain maneuvers as part of it. This is because Iris loves maneuvers, and I'm not sure I disagree. I think maneuvers are nice. It's why I like 4E. 4E's all maneuvers, basically. But yeah, it is one of my favorite gifts I've ever received. Is, to sit down and write a full subclass is a lovely thing. But yeah, they Guy Fieri as Holmes is great. Who would Watson be? You need someone more You need someone more demure for Watson. You need, I'm not sure. Paul Hollywood? That's not demure, but I just think that would be funny because they've both got the hair color. Anyway, so that's the path of the tactician barbarian that Iris made for me. And yeah, it adds that sort of lucidity for it. The idea of doing a barbarian where rage is essentially a stance you enter, that kind of makes sense. The stance needs to be more interesting than, you know, +2 to damage and hard to take half damage. Arguably, it should be different based on your subclass. Maybe the rage should be a subclass feature, and your primary feature should have something to do with feats of strength that you can do. Because, you know, you're always a strength-based barbarian, or almost always. Something like that. Castles and Crusades, which is an alright game, has a martial that is quite fun, because what it gets as its primary resource is a feat of martial prowess. And it's like, why are we just letting the wizards get away with changing the world? Let's have someone who can cut a mountain in half, or lift, or at lower levels, lift a whole drawbridge yourself to climb under it and stuff like that. Regardless of what your strength score is, you can do a feat of martial prowess where you just sit down and you go, hey, I would like to try to do this, please. And the GM goes, yeah, use your feat of martial prowess. You get one a day where you break the rules because you're that strong, because you're that special. And I like that concept, and I've always liked that concept, and I would like to bring that into more games. 13th Age uses that for some features. It has a sort of blend where some features are much more improvisational. There's a rogue trick one where your subclass can be that I can just improvise some nonsense that I do mid-combat, and like swinging from chandeliers and stuff like that, and the GM just has to go, yeah, sure. You're the rogue, this is your thing. And that costs a resource, but it notes everyone else can do it. You're the only one who's guaranteed to succeed. You know, everyone else is going to have to do a skill check. You can just get across there because you're the rogue. And stuff like that, but it doesn't have it for every class. The way Wizards of the Coast fixed it, in my opinion, it doesn't go far enough. I think you should have more rages every day. But they fixed it in two parts. First of all, rage gives you additional bonuses. So they fixed it in the class, and they also fixed it in a core mechanic that everyone has access to, but it also works particularly well for barbarians. So at, I think it's 3rd level, while you are raging, you can choose to use strength instead of any other ability score for acrobatics, intimidation, perception, stealth, or survival checks. Code it in. DM can't say no. I love that when you're angry, you can do a perception check using strength. I can't understand where that's coming from, but it's awesome. You're so angry, your senses are honed. So first of all, you're now much better at a lot of other things using your rage. It is now a choice whether you want to use it outside of combat, and it now lasts 10 minutes. And you don't have to attack anymore to maintain rage. You can instead use a bonus action. Attacking does maintain it, but you can use a bonus action to maintain it instead. Which means you don't have to run to the nearest enemy and attack. You can do some other things now for once. You can tank, maybe, for once. They should go further and make it any skill roll. Yes, honestly, because that is very funny, and D&D is primarily a comedy game. I agree. The other change that they've made, which is broadly available to everyone, but I think also adds some nice abilities to the barbarian, is weapon mastery. So when you hit someone with a weapon, every time you hit someone with a weapon, you apply some additional effect based on the mastery property. If, for example, you've got a Great Axe Barbarian is a classic, your mastery is Cleave. You hit one, you can hit one to the left, or you can hit an additional adjacent creature, which is nice. Now you're starting to think about, well, where can I position myself on the battlefield that I can get the benefit of Cleave? It's not just go to the nearest person and hit anymore. But even then, that's relatively simple. On the Hand Axe, which is your, another classic barbarian thing, you get the Vex mastery, which is if you hit a creature with it, you get advantage on your next attack against them. That means you might not necessarily need to use reckless attack anymore, which means you're going to be able to better tank if you take out a weaker weapon. You're now having to make some choices. You can choose any weapon, though, because barbarians can use any weapon. So you might have instead a weapon that's going to knock someone prone, or a weapon that's going to shove someone. And it just gives you more choices in the fight. I still think it doesn't go everywhere for it, but it does give you more things on the like minute to minute attack, and then you can fill out things with the subclass as well. On top of that, they also fixed the sort of back half of the barbarian. This is not something that was what I was talking about before, but it is also about making more choices. Yeah, you can take a gun. Yeah. I mean, let's say you take a pistol, because pistols are in the new player handbook. If you take a pistol, that will give you Vex again. So that's the one where you have advantage if you hit on them. If you take a musket, it has the slow mastery. So if you shoot someone with a musket, their speed is reduced by 10 feet. That's a really helpful tanking thing. It's also really helpful for ranged characters in general, because it means they can sort of kite them a little bit. But yeah, the other change that Barbarian's got is Brutal Strike, which is an alternative to Reckless Attack, because Reckless Attack at higher levels doesn't really make sense. It doubles your crit range, that's about it. Because at higher levels, Reckless Attack isn't providing the benefit that it normally does, because your chance to hit is pretty high. Once you hit level 9 or 10, you're hitting the enemy most of the time, because the AC is kind of bounded to a certain range. It's rare to get something above 20 ever. Like some gods, Tiamat has an AC of, I want to say, 25. But all that time, your attack bonus has been going up. So your chance to hit is increasing over time, because it sucks to miss in D&D. In other games where something happens when you miss, it's not so bad, but in D&D, when you miss, nothing happens, it's the null result, it sucks. So what they've done instead is they've said, well, if you use Reckless Attack, so you're providing advantage to anyone attacking you, you can, instead of getting advantage, you can get a different effect if you'd like. And the two it provides you are a Forceful Blow, where if you hit them, your Reckless Attack is essentially you channeling your rage. When you hit someone, they are pushed 15 feet away from you. And then you can move straight toward them without provoking opportunities, so you can follow up. Lancer fans might recognize a Caliban build in there, which is what I'll be going for in Lancer. So, Reckless Attack, whack, they go 15 feet back and you follow up. That's really cool. Hamstring Blow is the other one, is their speed is reduced by 15 feet, so that's a really good tanking one. You get some mobility, and as you level up, you get more options in that. So you do start to get these almost like maneuvers later on. And I think that does fix it, broadly speaking. I would like maybe that to come online earlier, but I don't mind. A lot of this edition this mini 2024 edition has been about putting something big and new at 10th level, because most people don't play after there. They want it to feel a bit fresher. So to encourage people to play, because if you get to level 9 and you're getting to the end of Cursedness and you know, it's just about finishing, you unlock Brutal Strike at level 9 and you're like, oh, I've only just got this though, and it gets upgraded later. I kind of want to play another game after this, you know, with the same character. They want to encourage that instead of just, oh, let's all start again at level 1. And I get that, because there are some interesting things you can do at high level in high level D&D, but there aren't anywhere near as many as you get 1 to 10. Yeah. What is... I'm just thinking, what is the most absurd hack I've done in a game? I'm trying to think, because I've done a lot of hacks to D&D. I've done few hacks to other games in general, because, you know, I've run one game way more than the others. That will change over time. I mean, Mobius Command itself is 90% a hack as well. But I think it's probably the most absurd one. Probably the naval combat rules I bolted onto D&D for Nordmark. The worst part is it works. It shouldn't. It really shouldn't. But the worst part is it actually works. It's too much. I think it needs simplifying. I think that's always the way with rules. You start off going pretty well, and then you're like, what if I add this? What if I add this? What if I add this? And you're like, oh no, I've done too much. The naval combat rules are... So the idea is that the ship that you're on has stations. Stations are roles, essentially, and that you sit in one station for a little bit of the fight, and that gives you some abilities. The helm, the crow, surgery, which is where the doctors are, the deck, and guns. And while you're in those, you get an action that you can use instead of your normal action. You can do your normal action instead. You know, if you don't want to fire the guns, you can shoot off a fireball if you want. I didn't want it to be too complicated. So you get a couple, like raise anchor, drop anchor, speed up, slow down, focus fire, look around, that sort of thing. But the main sort of complexity about it is the movement. You have to... What's the best way to explain this? You have to move forward to turn. You can't turn on a dime in the naval combat, because I wanted there to be a chance you can crash, and I wanted there to be a chance you can force your enemy to crash through good positioning and tactics. And that is something that's not really... Like, facing doesn't really exist in 5e. I know the DMG has rules for facing, but no one uses them. So the idea was that you'd have the wind pushing you along, and that's going to make things complicated. It's either going to make you faster in one direction or slower in the other. But also that you have a turn rating, and that's how many squares you've got to go before you can rotate. And that sort of creates a space. It works better on hexes. Absolutely works better on hexes. It looks a lot more natural on hexes, but you can do it on squares. And, you know, if your turn rating is 2, you've got to go forwards 2 before you can turn one face on... so you can rotate 90 degrees on the square, or rotate 60? I think on a hex. Is it 60? Yeah, 660s are 36, so 660s are 360. Before you can turn 60 degrees, and that sort of makes you do this long curve. And you can alter that by slowing the ship down, which will let you go twice as tight on the corner. Or you can just stop. You can bring yourself to a stop if you need to rotate, and that's fine. But it does mean you've stopped, which means everyone else can kind of, like, position themselves way better to take you out. We've done 2 naval combats in Nordmark, and the first time everyone was still learning it, but they picked it up pretty quick. And the second time, they had worked out ways to use the rules to just absolutely decimate the enemy. They were fighting a larger ship than them, But they worked out that what they could do is if you got the ships close enough to each other, you could just jump from one to the other. I'm not stopping you doing normal actions. You can just do a jump. You can run, do a jump. You can unleash a fireball. You can get your normal bow out and shoot the captain, for example, in the head. That's all still possible. You know, these are additional actions, not your only actions. But at the same time, you had Emvis's character up in the crow's nest, who's the really high perception ranger, looking out everywhere and is basically pointing out areas, like weak spots essentially, for the gunners who are firing using their attack modifiers to aim at to do extra damage. And you know, stuff like that. And then it was the idea of, do you target the crew so that they can't rearm the cannons faster? Because D&D cannons, this is not something I've invented. D&D cannons have a minimum number of crew they need to be rearmed, otherwise it takes longer than one turn to rearm them or to reload them. That's something that's just part of the rules anyway. So, you know, you had these choices to make, and it made for quite a tactical fight. And, you know, the map was just open seas with a scattering of rocks all around, so that they had to worry about that if they were turning. Because their guns were only facing out in one direction, so they've got to rotate so that they can fire across, and things like that. Yeah, it worked well. That's the most complex hack I've done. If I was doing any other, like, if I was starting off and doing a pirate campaign, I would not be doing it in 5e, probably. I would probably do 7th Sea. But Nordmark isn't a pirate campaign. It's a campaign that just happened to have people go up on a boat for a couple of sessions. And I think that's where hacks, that's where we need hacks. That's why every game needs to be hacked. Because you're going to have a campaign that's 90% political intrigue, but for 3 sessions, you all end up, I don't know, chasing a train, chasing a lightning train through the tunnels of New South Switzerland, and now you need to know how combat works on a moving train, or between 2 moving trains that are next to each other, or something like that, and you're like, I could do a map, maybe, if the rules in the game I'm playing support it, but maybe not. Yeah. So, I think we're getting sort of towards the end of the time. And sorry about all the drop frames. I will get on to Virgin and see if I can get that sorted out. It's annoying that it picked today to pop up. It was fine yesterday. Or the day before yesterday, even when I was streaming. Just want to spend the last sort of 15 minutes or so before I stop talking about things that have caught my interest lately, because I'm always sort of looking at new games to pick up. There's a section on my Discord which is all about games I'm planning to run, and I've been looking at a lot of systems for those. So I've been looking at high magic low lives. I have been looking at The Sword, the Crown, and the Unspeakable Power. I have been looking at, obviously, Savage Worlds recently. I've been running for Mobius Command. I've been looking at Deadlands as well, which is Savage Worlds, but Wild West. And I've been looking at Stars of Outnumber recently. I've also been reading through Everyday Heroes, which is it's a generic system. So I should preface this, that Everyday Heroes got in contact with me and went, hey, do you want to run a game on your channel? We can provide a PDF of the book. And I was like, well, I'll take a look at it. So I've been taking a look at it. I will run a session in the new year. It's going to be in January, probably in January. We're going to have to, you know how scheduling is. I kind of like it. I do kind of like it. It was designed by them. This system was built by them to what they originally did. What the company was originally known for was making TTRPGs out of existing media products. So they made like the Kong, Skull Island TTRPG. You know how movies have been coming out with TTRPGs alongside them so that you can experience a little bit of the world that's in there? They were doing that, right? So they built this rule set to let them do games pretty quickly in all sorts of systems. Let me have a quick look at which ones they did. I know they did Kong. I think they did a Jurassic Park one. Although that, I suppose, is thematically similar. Let me have a look. But anyway, they developed this system in-house to let them create these bespoke RPGs based off of an existing product. Here we go. So they've done Pacific Rim, The Crow, Kong, Skull Island, Highlander, Total Recall, Rambo, Universal Soldier, and Escape from New York. They've done like RPG books based on all of those. So this is the system that powers all of those. It's those are sort of splat books, I suppose, based off of it. But a lot of them came first, and then they've now built this core rulebook from what lessons they've learned from it. And I'm reading through it, and I'm like, yeah, actually, this works. Like, this is good for that sort of particularly that sort of 90s action movie or 90s sci-fi movie. I think if you wanted to run Stargate, the movie, you could do that in this really easily. I will say, if you want to run Stargate SG-1, there is a Stargate SG-1 TTRPG. It's actually pretty good. It is a 5e hack. Maybe I should go through that sometime. It is a hack of D&D 5e. It adds a lot and changes a lot. And includes some interesting mechanics that I think are worth talking about sometime. The tension die is interesting. It's not like the 13th Age escalation die, for those familiar. The escalation die in 13th Age is a counter that goes up every round of combat, making your chance to hit increase as combat goes on, so that theoretically combat doesn't drag, because you're not missing on round 5. You're almost always going to hit, and some of your powers only unlock at later turns, because you can maybe only do your extra powerful attack when the escalation die is at 3, for example. The tension die is set at the start of the session, and it is there to represent your chance of dying. If it's a D4, it's low. We're in a light episode of Stargate SG-1, you know? Maybe someone's dreaming that... O'Neill is dreaming that he's bowling every night. And they're like, what's going on here? You know? That's a light, easy, mild episode. Basically, you cannot die if its tension die is a D4. If the tension die is a D12, you are in a season finale and everything is off the table. Someone might die, a main character, you might die, your character might die. You are going to be up against extremely hard fights. You need to worry. If they go, the tension die today is a D12, that's when you need to be careful. If the tension die is a D4, that's when you can be heroic and silly. But what the tension die does is your special powers add the tension die to either their chance to hit or their effect. So if you're a particularly strong melee fighter, you might have like an overhead swing that adds the tension die to damage. So if your chances of dying are higher, you're going to be dealing more damage. I think it's a really, really good idea. I don't know if they invented it, but it's certainly the first place I read about it. I think it's a really good hack to add on to that, because it has that. And this is something this is like one of those really weird things that a lot of people didn't like, but I did in Metal Gear Solid 5. Before every mission, it runs a series of credits. Always crediting Hideo Kojima at the start, but it runs credits for everyone in there, including what characters appear in there. And right at the end, it will sometimes mention something called the Skulls. And the Skulls are an elite unit that will hunt you down incessantly. But the effect meant that if at the starting credit crawl of that quest, that mission, you see the Skulls, you are instantly full of dread. you are sitting there going, oh god, when are they going to show up? Because there is like 90% of the game, you can't do anything to them. They're basically invincible. They are faster than you. They are terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. So you see that there and you fear. Attention die of D12, I think, would do the same to me. If I sat down and my GM went, today, you might die. That would worry me. But it works the other way around. If it's a D4, I'm like, okay, I can relax a little bit and I can drive this character like I stole it. But if it's a D12, I'm like, oh my god. And it gives you that expectation ahead of time, so that no one's going to get surprised by death if it happens, which is nice, because getting surprised by it can suck. It depends on the game, but most of the time it can suck. But it allows you to also get ready for the fact that you might. And start thinking about heroic ways that might happen. And of course, it's Stargate. Death's never the end. Just look at Daniel Jackson. He came about 8 times. Sorry, I was talking about Everyday Heroes anyway. I've been reading through that, and it's got some really interesting ways to build characters. It's sort of mostly a class-based progression, with some feats in there, but I quite like it. I'm going to be running a game with Bree and Iris in the new year. Just a little one-shot on it, but I might run more if it proves popular, because I think the system might be quite fun for people. It is sort of it's sort of the idea is it's a modernized version of D20 Modern, basically. Refreshed for 5th edition D&D. Also based off some learnings from 5th edition D&D. And apparently some of D20 Modern's original designers worked on it. So it's got this sort of blend of things from there. And yeah, that's what I've been reading lately that's quite interested me. And yeah, Keith, I'll get you on. We can chat terrible RPGs. We can also chat some good ones if you don't want to just talk about 4E. I'm kidding. You know I love 4E. But yeah, I mean, look for that game in the new year. It's going to be me, Iris, and Bree. Going to be a little Guild of Icon spin-off, sort of modernized version of it. So modern day Guild of Icons, sort of little one shot. Should be nice. Should be nice. I think that should be good fun. But yeah, as we're dropping frames again, as always, which is very annoying, we'll stop there. I'll probably put this up on YouTube so that people can watch the sort of local version that I've got, which doesn't have the frames dropping all the time. I haven't 100% decided what I want to do with this yet. As I said at the beginning, I'm keeping this pretty free and pretty lax. I don't want to force it into some format too early. You know, it may be something I don't do again. It really depends if people even are, you know, that interested in it over a long term. But I think it's a side that people don't talk about that much. You get a load of streams of people making their world building, right? And working on lore, and it's usually world building for things that never come out. I know it's like never turn into games or anything like that. Sorry, there's fun in world building. I know that. It's just, if you aren't using it, why? Like, playing it's fun too, right? Playing it is a better form of world building, in my opinion. But yeah, to each their own. But I do think playing a world is a better way to flesh it out. And it's the same with a character. Playing a character is a better way to build its backstory or personality. I'd love to get you, Keith, on there. I'd love to get Eon on here. I'd love to get Iris on here as well. Iris, I would love to talk about the process that went behind the design of A.O. Dunwich's Iris's character subclass, because Iris wrote that. And I think it's a pretty good subclass. There's a couple of features that never worked, which is mainly down to bad luck on Iris's part. But I think it came out pretty balanced. And I don't know how many subclasses how many subclasses she'd written before then. And, you know, it did what a subclass should. So I'd love to discuss that with her, or anything else. And, you know, I'd love to get a bunch of other people. I'd love to get Ben on as well. Talk about Overgrown, talk about Cybertopia, talk about creating hacks so large that they become their own games. Because Cybertopia DNA is a hack of... Well, Cybertopia DNA is based off of Data, Nerves, and Acquisitions, which is a hack of something else. Ben wrote Data, Nerves, and Acquisitions, and it's a hack of something else, and I can't remember what it was. And then Cybertopia DNA was run off of that, if I remember rightly. I'd have to double check with Ben. Because I remember reading messages about this, but we all know what my memory's like. But I think that's an interesting place as well, because that's where hacking is the first step to designing your own game. You know, it's becoming a designer yourself. You do a little bit. It's like modding in video games, isn't it? But yeah, that's going to be me. Let me just see what's going on in the future at the moment. Let's have a look. So Thursday, I'm going to be over on Keith's channel. So Kane SD on Twitch, and we are going to be playing some Lancer. I'm going to be playing. Keith's going to be running. It's a really fun campaign. It's really good. I think Lancer's a great game anyway. It's really fun, tactically interesting. DNA is a hack of Feather, Beak, and Bone. Thank you, Aeon. Yes. But yeah, Lancer's a great game. There's a great cast of characters. My team are like a really nice blend, 50-50 gremlin, 50-50 too old for this. And, you know, obviously check out the other Lancer games that have been going on Keith's channel, because there are two groups running simultaneously, which I think Keith's plan is to mix and match us between the two groups, but because there's so many players, you know, running one session for this many people would take years. So that's what we're going to be doing on Thursday. That's going to be at 7:30 GMT. And then on Friday at 11 in the morning GMT, I'm going to be back with Rizulka playing Baldur's Gate 3. It is our extremely chaotic run through Baldur's Gate 3. None of us are wearing any clothes. It's absolutely mad. It really is. I've played Baldur's Gate for over like 120 hours. I played through the Act 1 section, I think something like 4 or 5 times before the game came out. And I still found some things in Act 1 in the playthrough with Rizulka, because of how chaotically we went through it, that I'd never seen before. And now we're getting into the acts where I know less about them, because I didn't spend that long in Act 3, for example, even though it's huge. And now we're finding so many cool things. So that's going to be great. Check that out. And yeah, that's all for me. If I don't see you before Christmas, have a happy Christmas. If you observe, have a happy Hanukkah, have a great Kwanzaa. There are a few other things around this time as well. Have a good winter solstice. Saturnalia, is that around now? Is that the winter solstice? I know too little about many world religions, sadly. I feel like I'm missing one as well. My brain was trying to say Festivus, but I'm pretty sure that's just from Seinfeld, so I don't think that's real, unless it is now real. But anyway, have a wonderful winter break. I will probably still be streaming at random times over it anyway. Nothing scheduled or anything like that, though. And we'll be back in the new year for some of the more big random nonsense things like Dial Town, Mobius Command. We've got more Lancer that'll be coming in. There'll be more Dokapon Kingdom. And I'll be starting up a new series of things, which is where I will take a game and I will put in the weirdest set of mods I can find, and we'll see how long I maintain my sanity. First one for that will be Monster Prom, where we will be dating either Pepsi Man or Barack Obama. and you know, just things of that caliber, basically. All right. So until I see you all again, have a wonderful evening. We're going to go on